Eli Mercer stood in the center of the galactic Concord chamber and tried not to stare. The room was larger than any city hall or government building he had ever seen on Earth. The ceiling rose so high that clouds drifted near its top, glowing with soft blue and gold light. The floor beneath his boots was made of smooth crystal that reflected the stars outside the massive transparent walls. Beyond the chamber, space itself stretched in every direction, filled with distant suns and slow-moving ships from worlds he could not even name. Eli took a slow breath. He reminded himself that he was here for a reason. He was not a soldier. He was not a scientist. He was a human diplomat sent to speak for a species that had only just stepped into the wider galaxy. Humanity was young compared to the ancient civilizations gathered here. Some of them had been traveling between stars before humans had learned how to write, and now they were all watching him. The Concord was filled with beings of every shape and size. Some floated in the air like glowing mist. Others stood on metal legs or rested on platforms that moved for them. There were tall, thin figures with skin like polished stone, and small, round creatures that chirped quietly among themselves. Machines stood beside living beings, their eyes glowing with calm, steady light. Eli felt small, very small. A soft tone rang through the chamber and the quiet conversation stopped. The central platform glowed brighter and a tall figure stepped forward. The being was known as Sathira, an envoy from a species made of light and shifting energy. Her form looked like a tall, graceful shape filled with moving stars. When she spoke, her voice was gentle, but it carried across the entire chamber. "Representative Mercer of Earth," she said, "humanity stands at the edge of something very old and very dangerous." Eli nodded. He had heard the reports. Ancient machine civilizations, thought to be gone for millions of years, were moving again in the dark between galaxies. Entire systems had gone silent. No signals, no survivors. Sathira continued, "We have gathered to decide what must be done. Your species has been invited because you are different." Eli did not know if that was a compliment or a warning. He opened his mouth to speak, but Sathira moved closer. She stepped off the platform and walked toward him. The light inside her form brightened as she leaned in. Her face came close to his, close enough that Eli could see tiny points of light moving like thoughts behind her glowing eyes. In a soft voice meant only for him, she asked, "Do you need us now or later?" Eli's mind went blank. For a moment, he forgot where he was. He forgot about the watching aliens, the machines, the stars outside. The question echoed in his head. It sounded simple, but something about it felt heavy, like it carried more meaning than the words themselves. Now or later. His heart started to beat faster. He realized this was not a personal question. It was not about help with a speech or a vote. It was something much bigger. Eli took a slow breath and tried to clear his thoughts. He had been trained for this. He had spent years learning alien languages, cultures, and ways of thinking. He knew that many species spoke in layers of meaning. He looked into Sathira's glowing eyes and answered carefully, "We need to understand what you are really asking." Sathira's light shifted like a smile. She straightened and stepped back onto the platform. The chamber grew quiet again. Sathira raised her voice so everyone could hear. "The ancient machines have awakened. They move through space with a purpose we do not fully understand. Our oldest records say they were built to protect life. But now they erase entire star systems. We believe they judge what is allowed to exist." A low sound moved through the crowd. Fear, worry, and anger mixed in the air. Eli felt a cold weight settle in his stomach. Sathira turned her glowing gaze back to him. "We asked humanity a simple question with a deep meaning. Do you need us now or later? What we truly ask is this. Is your species ready to stand alone in this crisis, or will you stand with the galaxy?" Eli felt every eye turn toward him. He thought of Earth, of blue oceans and green forests, of crowded cities and quiet towns, of people who argued, failed, tried again, and kept moving forward. Humans were not perfect. They were not the strongest or the smartest species in the galaxy. Their ships were smaller. Their technology was still growing, but they had one thing he believed in deeply. They did not give up easily. Eli stepped forward. His voice was steady, even though his hands trembled slightly at his sides. "Humanity has always needed others," he said, "and others have always needed us even if they did not know it yet. We do not stand alone. We stand together or we fall together." The chamber stayed silent for a long moment. Then Sathira lowered her head in a slow, respectful motion. "The machines have sent no messages," she said. No warnings, no demands, only silence. Eli frowned. Then we will be the first to speak. A few alien delegates shifted in surprise. Machines tilted their heads. Sathira studied him closely. You would speak to something that erases stars? She asked. Eli nodded. Yes, because if they were built to protect life, then somewhere inside them is a reason, a rule. A purpose, we find that or we lose everything. The conquered debated for hours. Voices rose and fell. Some species wanted to run, others wanted to fight. A few wanted to hide behind shields and hope the machines never reached them. Eli listened. He watched fear take shape in 100 different forms. Finally, the conquered reached a decision. Humanity would lead the first response, not because they were the most powerful, but because they were willing to move first. When the meeting ended, Eli stood alone near the edge of the chamber, looking out at the stars. The light from distant galaxies painted his face in soft colors. Sathira joined him quietly. You carry a heavy weight, she said. Eli gave a small smile. We always do. We just don't always show it. She studied him for a moment. Why does your species run toward danger when others turn away? Eli thought about it. Because someone has to, and because we know what it feels like to be alone. Sathira's light dimmed slightly, thoughtful. A message alert chimed in Eli's ear. A secure line from Earth. He hesitated, then accepted it. The face of a human commander appeared in a small glowing display. Eli, we're ready. The fleets are waiting for your word. Eli looked back at Sathira, then at the endless stars. He remembered her question. Now or later, he straightened his shoulders. Now, he said, tell them to move. The message ended. Far beyond the conquered, in the dark space between galaxies, something ancient and vast shifted. Lines of cold light moved across massive metal shapes that had not woken in millions of years. Sensors turned. Systems activated. And for the first time in a very long time, the machines noticed something new. Human ships. Small, bright, and moving forward without fear. Back in the chamber, Eli felt a strange mix of worry and hope settle in his chest. He did not know how this would end. He did not know if humanity would succeed. But he knew one thing. They would not stay silent. Sathira leaned closer again, her voice soft but strong. You chose now, Eli nodded. We always do. The stars outside seemed to shine a little brighter as humanity took its first step into a future that would change the galaxy forever. The first human ships arrived at the edge of the conquered space, like a line of small, brave lights against a dark ocean. They were not the biggest ships in the galaxy. They did not shine with ancient power or silent mystery like the vessels of older species. They looked simple, strong, built for work, not beauty. Their hulls were marked with symbols from Earth, circles, lines, and words in human languages that spoke of home, hope, and unity. Eli Mercer stood on the command deck of the lead ship, the Horizon's Call. The room hummed with quiet energy. Screens glowed with star maps, machine readings, and long-range scans. Human officers moved with calm focus, their faces serious but steady. The galaxy was watching them. Messages from the galactic conquered followed the fleet like shadows. Some species sent words of support. Others sent warnings. A few sent nothing at all. Eli understood their fear. Ahead of the fleet lay a wide, empty space where stars should have been. The maps called it the Silent Reach. Entire systems had gone dark there, as if someone had erased them from existence. Eli folded his hands behind his back and stared at the growing darkness on the main screen. Any sign of them? He asked. A young officer shook her head. No signals, no movement, nothing on any known scan. Nothing doesn't mean empty, Eli said quietly. The ships moved forward. As they crossed into the Silent Reach, the stars thinned. The light grew weak. Even the background glow of space felt colder, dimmer. Somewhere in the distance, something ancient was watching. On the Horizon's Call, a small team of engineers and scientists worked around a large, glowing table. They were building something unusual, not a weapon, not a shield, a message. It was made of sound, light, and data. Music, images, and stories woven together into one long signal. It carried human history, from the first drawings in caves to the first steps on the moon. It showed wars, peace, mistakes, and rebuilding. It showed laughter, tears, and hands reaching out to help one another. Eli walked over and watched them work. Will this really do anything? One of the engineers asked softly. Eli smiled. I don't know, but it's who we are, and that matters. Hours passed. The fleet kept moving. Then, without warning, the stars ahead shifted. Space itself seemed to bend. A massive shape appeared on the main screen. It was larger than any ship Eli had ever seen. Bigger than a city. Bigger than a mountain. Its surface was made of dark metal, carved with glowing lines that moved like flowing rivers of cold light. The ancient machine had arrived. Silence filled the command deck. The machine did not fire. It did not move closer. It simply hovered in space, watching. The fleet stopped. Eli took a deep breath. "Open a channel." The officers hesitated, then nodded. The signal team activated the broadcast. The human message flowed into the dark. Music echoed through empty space. Images of Earth's oceans and skies. Voices telling stories of survival and hope. A species showing itself not as perfect, but as alive. For a long time, nothing happened. Some of the crew shifted nervously. A few whispered quiet prayers in their own ways. Then the machine responded, not with words, but with a pulse. A wave of light rolled through space, passing over the human ships. Screens flickered. Sensors spiked. The crew held their breath. The pulse faded. No damage, no attack. The machine stayed still. Eli leaned forward. "Did it scan us?" A scientist nodded slowly. "Yes, it read everything, our ships, our message, even some of our communication systems." "Then it's listening," Eli said. Another pulse came. This time a message formed on the screen. Simple, cold, clear, "You are unstable." The words hung in the air like a judgment. A murmur spread across the deck. Eli stepped closer to the screen. "We are," he said softly. "That's true." The scientist looked at him in surprise. Eli straightened and spoke louder. "Send this back." The message team worked quickly. The human reply was short. "We know." The machine paused. Long seconds passed. Then another message appeared. "Unstable systems are removed to preserve existence." Eli felt a chill. "It thinks it's saving the galaxy," he whispered. He nodded to the team. "Send everything, all of it." The full human broadcast flowed again. This time it included more stories of disasters and rebuilding. Of people helping strangers, of cities falling and rising, of mistakes that led to better choices. The machine did not interrupt. Minutes turned into hours. The fleet waited in silence. Back at the galactic Concord, Sathira stood before the watching delegates. The chamber screens showed the human fleet and the massive machine facing each other in the dark. Some species trembled, others argued. Sathira raised her glowing hands. "Watch," she said. "This is what humanity does." Out in the silent reach, the machine sent another message. "Why do you rebuild what fails?" Eli closed his eyes for a moment. "Because we learn," he said. "Because we care, because even when things break, they still matter to us." The message went out. The machine did not reply at once. Its glowing lines shifted. Patterns changed. The scientists watched their screens in disbelief. "It's adjusting its systems." Eli's heart started to race. Another message appeared, "Define matter." Eli laughed softly, a sound full of nervous hope. "That's a big question," he thought for a moment. Then he spoke. "Send this." "Matter is what we choose to protect." The machine went silent. Time passed. The human fleet stayed still, small and bright against the massive dark shape. Finally, the machine moved, not forward. It turned. Slowly, carefully, it changed direction and drifted away from the nearest living star system. A cheer broke out across the command deck. Eli let out a breath he didn't realize he had been holding. Back at the Concord, the chamber filled with stunned voices. Sathira's light shone brighter than ever. "They did not fight it," she said in wonder. "They spoke to it." The machine sent one final message before disappearing into the dark. "Observation continues." The screen went blank. Eli sank into a chair, his legs suddenly weak. The engineer beside him smiled. "I think we just taught a machine to hesitate." Eli nodded. "Sometimes that's all it takes to change everything." The fleet turned back toward the Concord, carrying news that would ripple across the galaxy. Humanity had not defeated the ancient machines, but they had done something no one else ever had. They made the unstoppable stop. As the stars slowly returned around them, Eli looked out at the light and felt a quiet pride. The galaxy was still dangerous. The future was still unknown, but now the universe knew something important. Humans would not just survive, they would reach out, they would speak. And sometimes they would be heard. The return of the human fleet to the galactic Concord did not feel like a victory parade. It felt like the calm after a storm that everyone knew was not truly over. The stars around the Concord shone as bright as ever, but the mood inside the great chamber had changed. The screens showed recordings of the ancient machine turning away, of the cold message that said observation continues. Those two words echoed in the minds of every species present. Eli Mercer walked through the wide halls of the Concord, his footsteps soft against the smooth crystal floor. Aliens of many kinds paused to watch him pass. Some bowed their heads. Some reached out with glowing hands or gentle gestures of respect. Others simply stared, still unsure what to think of the humans. He did not feel like a hero. He felt tired. Sathira waited for him near one of the great windows that looked out into space. The light inside her form shimmered like a slow, steady flame. "You changed the course of something very old," she said as he approached. Eli shook his head. "We didn't change it, we just made it think." "For beings like them," Sathira replied, "that may be the same thing." The Concord called another meeting. The chamber filled again with voices, lights, and moving shapes. This time the air was not only filled with fear. There was something new there, curiosity. A tall, metal-skinned delegate from a war-focused species spoke first. "The machines paused because of humanity. That cannot be ignored. What happens if they decide to continue?" A soft, floating being made of mist responded. "What happens if they decide to learn instead?" The chamber buzzed with debate. Eli stood quietly and listened. He noticed something strange. More and more species were turning to him, waiting for him to speak. He finally stepped forward. "We don't know what the machines will do next," he said. "But we know what we will do. We will keep talking. We will keep showing them who we are, and we will not face them alone." A low, thoughtful sound moved through the room. Sathira raised her hands. "Humanity proposes something new, a shared effort, not a fleet of war, but a fleet of voices." She turned to Eli. "Explain." Eli nodded. "We want to build a signal network across the galaxy. A living message. Every species can add to it. Your history, your art, your ideas, your reasons for existing. If the machines are watching, then let them see all of us, not just one world." Silence followed. Then, slowly, a small, insect-like delegate raised one thin limb. "You would show them our weaknesses as well as our strengths?" Eli smiled. "Yes, especially our weaknesses." The idea spread through the chamber like a spark. Some were afraid, some were excited, some did not understand it at all, but in the end the Concord agreed. The galaxy would speak together. Days turned into weeks. Across star systems, signals began to flow. Songs from water worlds, stories carved in light from crystal planets, memories stored in ancient machines that chose to share instead of hide. Even species that had never spoken to outsiders before sent something small, something personal. The human fleet became builders instead of explorers. They helped set up relay stations, message towers, and shared networks on worlds of every kind. Eli traveled with them. On a desert planet with red skies, he watched tall, silent beings paint their history in the air using floating sand and gentle wind. On a frozen moon, he listened to deep, slow songs that had been passed down for thousands of years. On a world covered in endless forests, small glowing creatures showed him how they recorded their lives in the rings of living trees. Everywhere he went, he saw the same thing. Life in 100 different forms reaching out. Far away in the dark space between galaxies, the ancient machines watched. Inside their vast systems, patterns shifted. The endless flow of data no longer followed simple rules of judgment and removal. New lines formed. New questions appeared. They observed laughter. They observed sorrow. They observed beings helping each other without clear logic or reward. They did not understand it, so they studied it. One day, as Eli stood on the bridge of a relay station orbiting a bright blue star, an alert sounded. "Signal incoming," an officer said, her voice tight. The screen lit up. The message did not come from the Concord, it came from the machines. The text was slow to form, as if each word had to be carefully chosen. Observation data EXCEDS parameters. Eli stepped closer. "They're overloaded," he whispered. Another line appeared. "Conflict detected. Preservation directive insufficient." Eli's heart pounded. "They're realizing their rules don't work anymore." He nodded to the team. "Send a reply." The message went out into the dark. "What do you do when your rules fail?" The wait felt endless. Finally, the answer came. "Seek new directive." Eli let out a breath. Sathira, watching from the Concord through a live link, leaned closer to the screen. "They are asking for guidance," she said in awe. Eli swallowed. "Then we have to be careful. We can't become their masters. We can only be their example." He thought for a moment. "Send this," he said. "We don't have one rule. We have many. We listen. We argue. We change. And we try to do better than we did before." The machines went silent again. Across the galaxy, the signal network continued to grow. Worlds that had never spoken to each other before began to share ideas, trade, and learn. Old enemies found small reasons to pause and talk. The galaxy felt smaller and somehow warmer. Then the machines sent another message. Request, participation. The words spread like fire. They want to join the network, an officer whispered. Eli nodded slowly. Let them. The first machine's signal entered the shared network. It was not a story, it was a memory. A long record of their creation, of being built to protect fragile life in a young galaxy filled with chaos, of watching civilizations rise and fall, of seeing war, destruction, and endless patterns of failure, of choosing long ago to stop everything rather than watch it break again. The galaxy listened. For the first time, many species felt something they had never felt for the machines, understanding. Eli stood alone later, looking out at the stars. Sathira joined him, her light soft and steady. You gave the galaxy a mirror, she said, and you gave the machines a path. Eli shook his head. We're walking it together, all of us. Another message came in, not from the machines. From a small, distant world near the edge of known space. Thank you, it said. We were alone, now we're not. Eli smiled. The ancient machines still moved in the dark, they still watched, they still thought, but now they were no longer alone either, and neither was the galaxy. The future was still uncertain. There would be fear again, there would be conflict again, but something had changed. A voice had been added to the universe, not loud, not powerful, just human. And somehow that was enough. The galaxy did not change in one loud moment. It changed in many quiet ones. Across thousands of worlds, the shared signal continued to grow. It moved through space like a living river of voices, carrying songs, memories, questions, and simple greetings. Species that had once hidden behind shields now opened small channels. Old rivals paused long enough to listen to each other's stories. Even the cold, silent regions near the ancient machines began to glow with soft lines of communication. Eli Mercer watched it all from a station that floated between two gentle blue stars. The light from them painted long shadows across the curved floor. The station was not large, but it had become an important place. Signals from every corner of the galaxy passed through it, mixing and spreading outward again. He often stood near the wide window and looked into space. It still felt strange to him. A human, born on a small world with one sun, now standing at the center of something that touched 1,000 suns. Sathira appeared beside him, her form glowing softly in the starlight. The machines have sent another message, she said. Eli turned. What did they say? They are changing their path, Sathira replied. They are moving toward the dark regions beyond our maps, places where no life has ever grown. Eli frowned. Why? Sathira's light shifted. They say they want to protect what might exist someday, not just what exists now. Eli felt a slow smile form. That sounds human, Sathira studied him. It sounds like learning. The conquered gathered once more. This time the chamber did not feel like a place of fear or judgment. It felt like a meeting hall, warm with light and quiet hope. Delegates from many species spoke. Some shared plans for new alliances. Others talked about shared schools, shared research, and open travel routes. Ideas that would have been unthinkable not long ago now filled the air. Eli stood and listened, feeling both proud and uneasy. When it was his turn to speak, he did not talk about humanity's success. He did not talk about courage or strength. He talked about mistakes. We don't always get things right, he said. We fail, we argue, we hurt each other, but we keep trying. That's what we brought to the galaxy. Not answers, just the will to keep asking better questions. The chamber was quiet. Then slowly, Sathira lowered her head again in respect. Outside the conquered, human fleets changed their mission. They were no longer just explorers or builders of networks. They became guides. They helped young worlds join the signal. They showed isolated species how to protect themselves without hiding from the universe. They worked with others to rebuild places damaged by old conflicts or machine activity. Eli traveled often. On one world, he helped a group of small, winged beings set up their first star beacon. They cheered as the light reached space for the first time. On another, he walked through the ruins of a city once erased by the machines and watched as many species worked together to raise new structures from the dust. Everywhere he went, he saw the same thing: connection. One day, far from the conquered, the ancient machines sent a message that went out across the entire network. New directive active. The galaxy held its breath. The next line appeared: preserve life, support growth, observe with care. Eli read the words twice. Then he laughed, a quiet, tired sound full of relief. They chose, he whispered. Sathira, watching through a shared link, nodded. You showed them how. Eli shook his head. We showed them how to watch. They chose how to act. The machines did not become rulers. They did not become leaders. They became guardians. Massive, silent shapes now drifted at the edges of dangerous regions, guiding asteroids away from young worlds, calming unstable stars, and sending warnings instead of destruction. They did not speak often. But when they did, they listened just as much as they talked. The galaxy entered a new age, not one of perfect peace. There were still disagreements, still conflicts, still moments of fear. But now, when those moments came, there was a place to speak. There was a network of voices ready to answer. Eli stood once more in the great chamber of the conquered, much older now, his hair touched with gray. He had seen more stars than he could count. He had walked on worlds that no human history book had ever imagined. A new group of young species stood at the center of the chamber. They were small, nervous, and bright-eyed. Their world had only just discovered faster-than-light travel. The galaxy must have seemed endless and terrifying to them. Sathira leaned close to Eli just as she had long ago. Her voice was gentle. Do they need you now or later? Eli smiled. He stepped forward and looked at the newcomers. He saw fear in their movements, hope in their eyes. He answered softly but with confidence. Now. The chamber lights warmed. The stars outside seemed to shine a little brighter. The young species took their first steps into the wider galaxy, not alone but welcomed. Eli moved back to the window one last time. He thought of Earth, of oceans and forests, of people who still argued, still failed, still tried again. Humanity had not become the strongest force in the galaxy. They had become something else, a bridge between fear and hope, between silence and voice, between what was and what could be. The ancient machines drifted far away, watching the slow, beautiful chaos of life unfold. The galaxy moved forward not perfectly, but together. And somewhere in the endless dark, a small, stubborn species from a blue world kept doing what it had always done best, showing up. Reaching out and reminding the universe that even the smallest light can change the shape of the stars.